Hello, a very warm welcome to Middle East Matters. I'm Sanam Shantier. Coming up on this week's show, a look at how the region's press has been covering France's closely watched election that pits Marine Le Pen against Emmanuel Macron in a second round. On the Lebanese border with Israel, Hezbollah offers a tour of Israel's defensive measures in preparation for any future conflict. Plus, eerie wedding dresses hung on Beirut's famous seafront, a protest against an archaic Lebanese rape law. But first, to the most closely fought election here in France's modern history. Heading to the second round, dark horse centrist Emmanuel Macron and the far-right Marine Le Pen. But you might be wondering why we're talking about this on Middle East Matters. Well, that's because the region's media outlets have been reacting in their droves, and our own Julia Seeger is going to bring you some of the pieces that stood out to her. Julia, let's start with Lebanon's daily L'Orient Le Jour. It talks us through the anti-establishment vote.
Absolutely. In its editorial note, it says that this election is really the proof that the French people are ready to go forward. They're ready to redraw the old political landscape, because if you add up the turnout of Emmanuel Macron, Marine Le Pen, and Jean-Luc Mélenchon, so a newcomer and two anti-system contenders, it shows that 65% of French people decided to vote against the two main political parties, left and right. And this is the first time in the history of France's Fifth Republic that the two main political parties are ousted in that way in the first leg of the election. But for L'Orient Le Jour, it's actually good news, echoing Emmanuel Macron's slogan. They're saying that France is en marche, meaning that France is moving forward.
Now, the personal life of one of the winning candidates, Emmanuel Macron, seems to be the hot topic in the region's press.
Absolutely. And this article by the Arabic edition of the Huffington Post describes in more details how Emmanuel Macron met his wife, Brigitte. Back in the day, he was 18 years old, he was in high school, and she was his teacher. And the article says that he even ended up in the classroom of one of her daughters. Now, the question that's being asked right now is whether this age difference is shocking to conservative Muslims. And the article tells us, well, not so much, because the Prophet Muhammad himself and his first spouse had pretty much the same age difference. And it's really, like you said, a recurring theme. It's also mentioned in this article posted by the very conservative Iranian website Asr-e Iran. Here, they've even listed 5 things you need to know about Brigitte Macron. And let me just tell you, this type of gossip is very unusual in a very conservative Iranian media outlet.
Now, lastly, Julia, as we can see here, the Israeli media seems to have very much focused on the Franco-Israeli participation in these elections.
That's right. Despite his disappointing show at home, 60% of French Israelis in Israel voted for right-wing candidate François Fillon. It's an important number, but it's still less than what Nicolas Sarkozy did in 2008 during the French presidential election. And meanwhile, well, Emmanuel Macron clearly failed to convince French Israelis, coming in a distant second with 31% of the vote, while Marine Le Pen only got 3.7%. Many French Israelis say today that their goal is really to block the far-right candidate mainly because her party has been accused of being anti-Semitic, but also because she's pledged to get rid of dual citizenship, so many of them are going to have to choose between one or the other. Now, there's another article that caught my eye is in Haaretz. It's entitled "The Tragic Reason an 8-Year-Old Jewish Girl Hopes Le Pen Wins." Now, the article ends on this powerful quote by this young lady. It's during a Jewish gathering to watch the election results here in Paris. The girl says that she doesn't like Marine Le Pen, but that she still wants her to win. And when she's asked why, she says, Le Pen wants to ban kippot from all public places. And since bad people attack Jews who wear kippot, maybe banning them is the way to stop the violence.
Julia Seeger, thank you very much for that mini press review of the region's coverage of the French elections. Next, while all eyes have been on the war-torn country Syria, tensions between Israel and Hezbollah been gradually increasing for several months. Their last full-scale military conflict was in 2006, but the war of words has been escalating. Last week, Hezbollah escorted journalists on a rare tour of Lebanon's southern border with Israel to demonstrate how the neighboring country will take measures in case of another conflict. Our correspondent was there.
A cliff dug into the rocks, new roads, earthen embankments. This is the stunning view of Israel's new defensive lines offered by Hezbollah. the Party of God invited 100 journalists on this rare visit to the Blue Line. Their objective? To send a message to Israel and the Lebanese.
Recently, the enemy escalated its political and media campaign to say that the war is imminent and at our doorstep. We organized this tour to tell Israel, you are the ones taking defensive measures. Hezbollah is at its highest level of readiness to defend Lebanon and the Lebanese.
We're less than 200 meters from an Israeli listening station. Although the visit was organized in coordination with the Lebanese army, units of UNIFIL, the UN interim force in southern Lebanon, were apparently not informed.
Please! Please! Take that!
I am calling al-Hammam from RAF intelligence. Yeah.
The blue helmets retreat. There's little question as to who controls the terrain here. On the passage of our convoy, a group of Hezbollah fighters posed brazenly. We were expressly forbidden to film them, but Agence France Presse disseminated these images. Their presence constitutes a violation of Security Council Resolution 1701, which ended the 2006 war, though it seems both sides are now ready to face off again.
We're not worried about war, and we do not fear it. We're even eager to fight. We will fight if it is imposed on us, and we will be victorious.
It's fighting talk that doesn't do much to hide the fact that Hezbollah, already widely engaged in Syria, would prefer to avoid conflict on two fronts.
Bottom line is the mutual deterrence between the two, I think, still stands strong. Both sides know that the next war is going to be of an order of magnitude far greater than 2006. But I think we have moved into an era of miscalculation, and that is because both sides are very jumpy at the moment.
And it's from the Syrian war, where Hezbollah are actively involved and Israel have carried out airstrikes, that the spark that could ignite the gunpowder may well emanate.
Turning now to Lebanon, where a law currently allows rapists to escape punishment if they marry their victim. Ahead of a May 15th vote in Parliament, activists are ramping up pressure. As part of one of the campaigns, 31 wedding dresses hung from nooses along the capital's corniche. Solange Mojan brings you the story.
Billowing wedding dresses strung to nooses. 31 white gowns, one for every day of the month, have been hung on Beirut's corniche. They're part of an art exhibit and a political plea to Parliament. MPs will be voting May 15th on Article 522 of Lebanon's Penal Code. It currently allows rapists to get off scot-free if they marry their victim. For rights activists, it's time for lawmakers to say yes to a motion that was proposed last year to get rid of the law.
We are calling on all parliamentarians to listen to our message. Every yes from you is a no to a rapist.
For some lawmakers, it's also high noon for the over 70-year-old measure to be scrapped.
Article 522 is from the Stone Age. It's not acceptable for people to talk about it anymore. How is it reasonable for a woman to be raped and then sold into a prison?
For the artist behind the exhibit, the floating dresses are meant to impart a ghostly feeling.
I hung the dresses because this kind of law reduces a woman to be simply emptied of her essence, to have no identity, and to be tied for life to something that doesn't correspond to her.
The campaign to raise awareness against the law made headlines last December, when women bandaged and dressed in white protested near the Lebanese parliament. The protests came on the heels of similar ones in Turkey. After widespread outrage and rallies, Turkey's government withdrew a proposal to give impunity to child rapists if they marry their victims.
Lastly, we take you to Bethlehem, where an ancient sacred art from some 2,000 years ago is being kept alive today. Artist Ian Knowles spends his days searching for the right kind of stone to paint religious paintings on. He's even teaching the art to local Palestinian artists. Here's Shirley Sidbon.
The process starts right here, outside Jerusalem. Ian Knowles chips away chunks of pigment from rocks. Later, he'll use them to make natural paint. He hasn't invented anything. The process is more than 15 centuries old.
Icons have been made in the Holy Land, I would say, since the 6th century, probably in the monasteries, and they will have made their own colours, their own pigments from local stone, just like we're going to do here now.
The artist crushes the stone and mixes it with water to make paint. He's become an expert at the art since he arrived in Bethlehem as a tourist 9 years ago. He's now opened a school for Palestinians and foreigners who want to learn how to make icons.
Iconography is an old Palestinian heritage, but it has been forgotten for a long time. Our idea was to bring this heritage back to its original place, so we chose Bethlehem for its importance in terms of religion.
Icons have always fascinated me, and more so in the last few years, because they're a kind of beautiful synthesis of God and prayer and art, and also ecology in the way that the pigments are all taken from nature.
Christians believe Bethlehem is where Jesus was born. More than 1 million pilgrims visit the city every year. But don't ask these painters to sell their work to tourists. They won't. The only thing they want to get for their icons is a blessing.
Well, that's it for all of us on this week's show. Do make sure you follow us on both Facebook and Twitter. That's Middle East Matters.